What's up, everybody? I'm John Hoover. Welcome to the YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about how Lincoln Riley goes about hiring his assistant coaches. You guys know he had a press conference last week to introduce DeMarco Murray and Jamar Cain. And I want to pull apart some of his comments that he made about how he actually arrived at bringing in those particular guys. First, if you want more videos like this, please remember to subscribe to this channel and or hit that notifications bell so you'll be the first to know when they're posted. And if you click like or want to leave me a comment, it does make a difference, I promise, and I do appreciate it. Also, please follow me on social media, on Twitter at John E. Hoover, or go like and follow my professional Facebook page at John E. Hoover Media. Those things, trust me, they're constantly evolving, so I encourage you to go check them out. Okay, let's get started. I've got gone back and watched last week's press conference videos a couple times. And I think what we had three guys who are thoughtful, insightful, very well spoken, which is what you'd expect. I thought Lincoln Riley and DeMarco Murray and Jamar Cain expressed themselves very well, as you would expect again. I thought they were very revealing with some of their answers as well. And I thought a couple of those topics, I found them just really intriguing. So today, I want to really dive into a couple of things Lincoln said about hiring and how he came to the conclusion that Jamar Cain was his guy to coach OU's outside linebackers and defensive ends. What he said about some of the philosophies that he sticks to when he's got an opening on the staff, and what he thinks about how he approaches his head coach, being the head coach on what has to be one of college football's youngest coaching staffs. First, I think you have to give it up to Lincoln for moving guys around on his staff, for changing guys' responsibilities and their positions and their titles to do what he ultimately feels will maximize player development. Now, I think you can point to that, player development, or lack thereof, as the real reason why Oklahoma has been, good enough to win the Big 12 Conference, but not good enough to win a college football playoff game yet. You saw it this past year, I think, when from January of 2019 to January of 2020, a total of 21 players entered the transfer portal. Now, some of that was obviously due to the recruiting the wrong guys, or maybe having to settle for some recruits that were, marginal in some cases, or in some cases, guys who just had no realistic chance of becoming a contributor at OU. But I think a lot more of these players leaving was because players who chose Oklahoma, many of them, remember, over other big-time programs, I think they did have the talent as high school prospects, but for one reason or another, they were never fully developed after they got here, even at a young age. I know you can blame some of that, in recent years at least, on coaches who are no longer with the program. Simple enough. Tim Kish, Kerry Cooks, Mike Stoops comes to mind. And obviously, particularly when it comes to defense, you can blame it on changing coordinators. It's just one of those things that happens. You migrate away from Mike Stoops' defensive scheme and transition into Alex Grinch's defensive scheme. There's no doubt that a player, all that stuff, played a huge part in those defensive guys entering the transfer portal. But whether it's Kish or Cooks or Stoops, I think there was a general lack of player development, a lack of coaching, you might say, which ultimately held Oklahoma back in the playoff. I think a lot of Oklahoma fans right now would rightly say that this program should be, competitively speaking anyway, on the level of an Alabama or an LSU. But look at the last two playoff games. Recruiting, now I know, is at the heart of all things college football, and I'm 100% in agreement with that. I really firmly believe that the recruits Oklahoma has been bringing in are not quite on the level as a lot of those guys in a lot of those other programs. I realize that. But isn't that where coaching comes in? Isn't that where Bob Stoops absolutely killed it early in his career? He wasn't bringing in stacks and stacks of five-star guys, but he was cranking out some of the best players in school history, really. National award winners, first-team All-Americans, first-round draft picks. Think about this, from 2000 to 2004, just 5 seasons, OU had 22 first-team All-Americans. Then over the next 11 seasons, Stoops' team produced just 16 first-team All-Americans. You can see the drop-off. Since 2000, Oklahoma has had 95 players taken in the NFL draft. Now, 23 of those, just over a quarter, came from those first 4 classes. And let's talk about what every recruit wants to talk about these days. First-round draft picks. From 2000 to 2005, that's the 99 team through the 2004 team, the draft, Stoops had 6 players go in the first round. Then from 06 to the 17 draft, that's 12 seasons, Stoops had 12 players drafted in the first round. You can see the drop-off. Go back and look at some of the names. It wasn't all five-star recruits who were getting into the NFL. It was players like Andre Woolfolk, Mark Clayton, Jamal Brown, Davin Joseph. They came in as either marginal recruits or very good recruits. None of those guys were elite. Sam Bradford and Trent Williams, they came in with very little fanfare, but they needed to be developed, and they were developed. Then those players became more and more and more rare. So I think Lincoln knows he's going to continue to lose elite prospects, like Jace McClellan and Jacob Phillips and Brock Vandegrift, etc., to the Alabamas and the LSUs and the Georgias of the world. So how does he have to counter that? Well, it's easy. He and his staff are going to have to outcoach their counterparts again, over and over. They're going to have to try to develop 3- and 4-star prospects into first-round draft picks. Simple as that. I know, easier said than done, right? I'm sure, but that has to be the plan moving forward. So to that end, I want to get into a couple of Lincoln's answers about hiring, about how first he hired Jamar Cain, but how also important staff chemistry is to him and what he thinks about being in charge of such a young and, an experienced staff. Big picture, Lincoln Riley's hiring decisions these past 2 years are going to shape this program for the next decade or maybe more. Let's hear from Lincoln on how he found Jamar Cain and why he hired him.
His name got brought to me by a couple of people that I really trust in the business, as did a lot of other names. And I just started researching him. And one, I found a guy that had success everywhere he's been. And then when you look at what he's done recruiting-wise in the last few years, he was just simply looking at those two things. We said, all right, we at least got to talk to this guy. And I'd never met Jamar, before he walked in the door to come sit down with Alex and I. And some people just grab you. They do. And he grabbed my attention quickly because he was just he said it in his answer, he's very confident and very kind of has a very focused approach to both recruiting and coaching and developing these kids. And it's been tested through time. It's been tested at different universities under different defensive coordinators. And then as I started talking to a lot of the coaches that he had worked for, all the answers were the same. It was the same conversations every single time. So you love the consistency that he's had. So it was the right fit at the right time. And we know how competitive certainly the defensive line, defensive end, outside linebackers. I mean, those type of bodies, there's the least amount of them. They're the hardest to find, and everybody wants them. And so you gotta be an elite recruiter. You got to be an elite developer of talent. And then as we got to know, Jamar, his family, they fit in with our culture here, our family atmosphere. It checked every single box.
Riley also got a question about his own personal hiring philosophies and how his past has really kind of determined how he goes about this thing. If you think about it now, Lincoln's 36. He'll turn 37 this football season in September. And he hasn't had just a heck of a lot of influences in his career. He's worked for Mike Leach. He's worked for Ruffin McNeil. And he's worked for Bob Stoops. And that's it. And now he's pretty much his own man as a head coach. Here's Lincoln Riley talking about how those experiences shaped him.
It's honestly a tough question to answer. Because I think every hire is so different. I've worked for guys. I've been lucky. The guys I've worked for in the past, I think, I've always thought the best coaches, as far as hiring assistant coaches, they don't care a whole lot about what the outside thinks. They're not necessarily trying to win the press conference. They're just simply hire the best person to do the job at the place that they can. And I learned that at first. I mean, I thought that was always one of Mike Leach's strongest qualities. He hired a bunch of no-name guys there that nobody had ever heard of, and now it's littered with head coaches and coordinators all across the country. I thought Ruffin did a great job of it as well. And then being here for a couple of Bob's hires or involved with a few when I got here, I always appreciated how decisive he was. I mean, he found his guy. He didn't waste a whole lot of time. That's always kind of been my feel. I mean, I don't want to sit here and go through the number of guys I've interviewed for spots, coaching spots in our staff since I've been here, but it's not a whole lot. I mean, I think you find the person and you lay out the qualities, and then I think the last part for me is I've always placed such a strong value on staff chemistry and how how well you do your job, but also how well do you work with the other people. And that's a big part of my field and interview process. When I talk to other coaches that have worked with a particular candidate, that's normally one of my first questions is, how's he get along with everybody? How's he get along with the players, the coaches, the support staff? Because I think that part is so key, and we've been lucky. We've had a lot of great staff chemistry, and so it's a fun process. I enjoy it because it's always exciting to, in any way that it transpires, it's always exciting to have a chance to bring in new people and people that you think can make you better. And I think these two guys make us better.
And lastly, I want to play a clip for you in which Lincoln acknowledges being a guy who's in charge of a staff with, again, 0 50-year-olds. 0. Bill Bedenbaugh and Cale Gundy are the oldest guys on staff. They're both 47. You can bet that Lincoln thinks this will be an advantage. Absolutely. But you can also bet that it's not something that he has mandated as a direction for the program. I don't believe Lincoln Riley is an ageist.
Well, I think it's great for a lot of reasons. I think obviously the recruiting, right off the top. I mean, I think the energy level, and then I think you maybe referencing the previous question. If I do look for any characteristic that I felt like has been important to any success that I've been a part of, I think guys that have that edge to continue to prove themselves. I still feel that way. Just like I did the first day I started coaching, I still feel like I'm trying to prove myself every single day, and that I have to. And certainly look for guys that have that same edge about them and that same competitiveness, and not guys. And not that an older coach doesn't have that, but I think some of the younger guys that we've hired, I think we share that, and just that edge and that competitiveness every day. And you have to have that in this job, from what it takes to recruit the great players, what it takes to develop the guys and that you have here currently, to give them support that they need. It takes a lot. And so I didn't go out saying we had to replace these two positions with two, quote unquote younger guys, but they were just the right fit and bring the right mentality to it.
That's it for today. Remember, if you like this video, I encourage you to hit the like button, leave a comment down below, or share it in your social media channels and tag me, and I will share it in mine. Also, please go find me on Twitter at John E. Hoover and on Facebook at John E. Hoover Media. Thanks for watching. See you guys.